one to take the stage is Esmee. So Esmee is going to come out on the stage, and she also has something that's really close to her heart. So for her, do you understand when vulnerable people are laid in bed for quite a long time, they get bed sores? Yeah? So this is something that she's on a quest to really end and see if it can be done differently. So Esmee, why don't you come out and share your story with us? Come on out. Yes. She's 22, has won this award.
Well, hello everyone. First of all, it is absolutely an honor for me to stand here on this stage, so thank you for having me. My name is Esmee Glas. I graduated as a nurse in July of this year. And in the last year of my study, I had to write my bachelor thesis. I wrote my thesis about pressure ulcers in vulnerable patients. I questioned why nurses have their focus on the treatment of those ulcers instead of on the prevention. Well, before I start, let me explain what are pressure ulcers exactly. Pressure ulcers, or in Dutch called decubitus, are wounds that occur on places on the skin where the blood flow is not optimal. Especially vulnerable patients, for example, with immobility or a lack of nutritional status, have a very high risk to develop those pressure ulcers. Furthermore, the first symptoms of the pressure ulcers can occur in only 2 or 3 hours, so it exists very fast. This first stage, you can see over there, is like if you have patches on the skin that don't turn white when you press it, can escalate to stage 2, stage 3, and even stage 4. And in the last stage, the whole skin tissue is completely lost. Sometimes even the muscle tissue is damaged, and in the worst case, you can even see the bone. All kinds of methods and materials have been introduced to treat those pressure ulcers. For example, wound care, special mattresses, wound dressings, creams, etc. However, during my research, I found out that nurses most of the time use these methods when the first symptoms have already been visible. And then you're not preventing anymore, you're treating, and it's already too late. And it's too late, and that's a very big problem, not only for the patient, but also for the medical staff and for healthcare in general. First of all, let's start with the patient. For the patient, the treatment of pressure ulcers is very intensive and very painful. The patient has to undergo wound care several times a day. He has to change his position every couple of hours, and he has a very high risk of getting other infections because of the immune system that is weakened. Well, then proceed with the medical staff. For the medical staff, the treatment is very time-consuming, while the work pressure is already that high. And that's also the biggest reason the nurses say that they don't prevent, but they are treating because of the high work pressure. And then at last, 2.5 billion euros are needed every year for the treatment of the pressure ulcers, because the patients have to stay in the hospital for a longer period of time, and there has to be an additional deployment of nursing staff, because all the nurses have to treat those wounds. But there is no question of all these burden when you just prevent the pressure ulcers. You can realize it by, for example, doing an adequate risk analysis of the patient, but also by organizing additional courses about pressure ulcers, the prevention and their symptoms. And I also recommend the wards in hospitals and nursing homes to introduce a work group of doctors and nurses that focuses on the prevention of those pressure ulcers. Because in my opinion, the pressure ulcers can be prevented. And for example, I think that if you just prevent the pressure ulcers, you can speak about a win-win situation, because time will be saved. And if you save time, you can still provide the best care for the patient, and at the same time, a lot of burden, a lot of money, and a lot of, well, work pressure can be prevented and will be cut down. And that's better for the patient, the healthcare, and the medical staff. My wish is to make more people aware of the importance of prevention. Not only prevention of pressure ulcers, but prevention in general for all kinds of severe diseases and disorders. I think that nowadays, with the tools and technologies we have, it is definitely possible to maintain or even to improve the health of the vulnerable people in our society, if we just focus on the prevention. Because I think prevention is the future. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well done, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah? So I have a few questions for you.
Of course.
My first question would be, what is it that you want us to know right here, right now, that we can be doing to help this?
Well, I think the importance of the knowledge about the wounds, because it is, you see it so many times when I work as a job as a nurse. I see those wounds occurring, and every time I hear nurses say, oh, well, that's just nothing, but it's already red. And I think it's just the importance that people know when do they have to say it's a pressure ulcer. Mm-hmm. So just the knowledge about these wounds and the impact on the patient. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's very important.
So why aren't patients naming this for themselves when it starts to get sore enough that it would then in 2 or 3 hours turn raw? Why aren't they naming it? Why aren't they speaking it out to the nurse? Or are they and it's just not being heard because it's not high on a level of priority?
I think it's both, because most of the time I hear patients say, oh, well, my somewhere hurts, and then I see it's red already. And I think the patient is aware of the fact it hurts, but he doesn't know the name, he doesn't know how to call it. And if he is not aware of his disease or his ulcer, then he doesn't know the importance of saying it to the nurse. Mm-hmm. So that's why I also say to wards, make a leaflet about these pressure ulcers and give it to the patient, so that they know what the impact is for itself and how he can prevent it itself. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's for patient and for nurses that they have to become aware of the pressure ulcers.
And when you say pressure ulcers, that means it's typically probably happening on our knees, on our bum.
Yeah, it's on places where the skin is very close attached to bones or to a thin layer. So if someone is laying on his back, then especially the bum and the elbows and the shoulder blades, but also ears, and it can occur everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
It's heavy.
Yeah. And 2 or 3 hours. That's intense.
Yeah, it's so fast.
Yeah. Is there something that we can do to support this mission that you're on? Something we can do, a Facebook page, a website?
Well, I think that if there are people here that just know more about pressure ulcers, feel free to come to me, then we can speak about this subject and make more people aware of it. And well, let's just share the subject. That's the most important thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yay! Yay!